Not all of us, but I think for a lot of us, we are perfectionists, and it's hard to admit that something's done. You never really feel like it's good enough. And when you do get that compliment, when someone says to you, oh, I absolutely love this, or you've done a great job of this, if you all of a sudden catch yourself kind of going, oh, it could have been better, or oh, I'm not really sure if that's done yet, that's another example of imposter syndrome. I think too, a good way to think about this is the questions that you ask yourself. If you're kind of feeling, I mentioned this one before, but like, what makes you an expert? Like, what makes you think you could write a blog post about that? Or I don't know, I find it sometimes with this podcast, like, what makes me think I'm qualified to talk to you about imposter syndrome? It's something that is so ingrained in us, this fear of failure, that we're not good enough, or maybe that somebody will find us out. Someone will listen to this and think, oh, I know way more about imposter syndrome than she does. Who does she think she is, recording this podcast episode? So I think this is something that we deal with regularly, and I don't think there is any way to stop it. That's the bad news. In everything that I've read, the sort of common agreement is that you cannot get rid of imposter syndrome. You cannot overcome it once and it'll never crop up in your life again. But what you can do is learn how to identify it and to realize that it's not rational. Imposter syndrome is irrational. It's something that we can't avoid, but something that we can identify and know that it is not a rational thought process. It is not correct. It is not accurate. It's just a way that we're feeling. Okay, so we've gotten to the point now where we can identify imposter syndrome. We know that it's not true that we aren't good enough, or that we're not adequate enough, or that we are not, that we don't deserve the success that we found. But how do we deal with it? Once we know it's there, how do we handle it? How do we get through it, and move on to the other side? So once again, I have broken this down into 5 steps for you, or 5, different things you could try to help you get over it. So the key thing here is that we need to befriend the inner critic. So instead of trying to completely avoid those thoughts or completely push them away, befriend them, let those thoughts out, whether you need to jot them down on a notepad, type them out on your computer, say them out loud, talk to a friend or a colleague, your partner, somebody that you trust. Get those thoughts out in the open. And you might find just by saying them out loud how silly they sound. That might be all it takes to help you realize, right, this is imposter syndrome, this is not true, and you move on. If that is not the case, because I know for myself it's not usually that easy, I've got 5 different things that we can try to get over it. So, first of all, write out your qualifications or your experience. Again, it might sound a little bit silly, but whether you type these out or you write them down on paper, write out the things that make you a professional at what you do. Maybe you have certain qualifications, you've taken courses, you've finished a degree, maybe you've been doing what you do for 10 years, maybe you've worked with 200 clients. Write out some kind of key points, whether they're achievements or levels of education or goals that you've hit in your career. Once you look at all those things on paper, chances are you'll realize pretty quickly that you absolutely are an expert in your field. Number 2, look at your progress. So your business, speaking to the small business owners, has probably progressed quite a lot from when it started. Depending on where you are in your business journey, you might still be in those starting stages, you might still be in your planning stages, but if you look at how you got to where you are today and all the things that you have achieved in that time, again, write them out on paper if you need to, highlight the big goals, look at, where you started. Maybe you've been able to increase your prices. Maybe you started working out with 1 or 2 clients a month and now you have 10. Whatever your achievements are, write them out on paper and keep them handy. I've not done it yet, but I've got this idea in my head about writing out my major milestones and the goals I've hit on a sheet of paper and putting that on the bulletin board above my desk, so that anytime these feelings of imposter syndrome creep in, I look up and I think, hey, I've made a lot of progress. And something I wanted to mention here, which is not a separate way to overcome this, but something to kind of factor into this progress thing. Stop comparing yourself to other people. I'm going to say that again. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Social media can be really bad for this. You look at someone else in your industry, they're way further ahead in their career. They have 5 times as many followers on Instagram. They get way more engagement on their posts. They seem to be booking all the kinds of clients you want. They're talking about how they're making a 6-figure salary. We all know these accounts. We all know people like this in our industries. Just ignore that. Block all of that out. Don't compare yourself to other people. First of all, you have no idea if they're being honest. Second of all, you have no idea where they are in their career journey. And third, you have no idea if their goals are even the same as yours. So instead of comparing yourself to the others around you, look at your own progress, how far you've come in your last 6 months, year, 5 years, 10 years of business, and compare where you are now to where you are back then, and guaranteed that will give you a big confidence boost. Number 3, look at feedback from your clients and customers. So if you are ever feeling like you don't do a good enough job, you're not professional enough, you don't deserve the success that you have, look back at the reviews that you've had, the emails that you've had from your clients, any feedback that you've had on products, people that have become repeat customers, repeat clients. Those are all huge achievements, and sometimes all it takes is being reminded of all the good you've done for other people, the impact you've made with their businesses, their family lives, whatever it is that you do, whether you're a product or a service-based business. Look at that feedback, and that should be enough to make you realize that you are great at what you do. Number 4, think about your USPs. So your USPs are your unique selling points, the things that really set you apart in your industry. Sometimes if you think about those things and, compare yourself to your industry, but in a good way, think about the ways that your products or services are unique, the different style or approach you take, what you offer that's different than the sort of industry standard or the others around you. And again, that's going to be a great reminder that there is a place for you, that you deserve the success that you found, and that you deserve to be where you are today. And finally, number 5, accept your limitations. So as small business owners, we are expected to wear a million different hats. So I may be a brand photographer and strategist, but I am also my marketing department, my web designer, my graphic designer, my IT department, my accountant. I am expected to wear all of these hats, and I play a bunch of different roles, but realistically, a lot of those things are not strengths of mine. I am awful with numbers. I am not great with anything too technical. I absolutely despise trying to do anything layout or website. So I have learned in time that outsourcing these things to people that do excel in those areas makes a big difference. If you are judging your merit on the things that you are worst at, that's not going to make you feel very good. So if you can focus on your strengths and don't beat yourself up for your weaknesses. We can't be good at everything, but find ways to get some help with the areas you're not as good at. So maybe if you're not quite ready to outsource yet and you're still at a point where you don't have the budget for that, or you're not quite ready to make that investment, maybe you take some courses and do some training that will help you get better at those areas that you're feeling a little bit, that you're lacking confidence in. There are ways to overcome these things, but if you are a painter and you're beating yourself up because you're not great at designing your website, catch yourself for that. Let yourself know that it's okay to have weaknesses, and really you should only be judging yourself on the key areas of your business. So if you are an artist, judge yourself on your progress with your art, not on your web design or your skills as an accountant. So those are 5 things that you can try when you are feeling, when you've identified that imposter syndrome and you feel it creeping in. Just to recap those, we've got: write out your qualifications and your experience. Look at the progress you've made in your own business or your own career if you are in a more traditional career field. Look at the feedback and reviews from your clients and remind yourself of the impact you've made in their lives. Focus on your USPs. Remember the things that make you different and why there is a place for you in your industry. And finally, accept the fact that we all have limitations and focus on your strengths instead. Find ways that you can overcome those limitations, whether that's outsourcing or doing some training, and don't judge yourself on the parts of your business that don't relate to sort of the key product or service that you are offering. So I hope that helps. I hope that that gives you some sort of strategies or some things to try when you do feel that imposter syndrome creeping in. I hope also that gave you something to think about, and that maybe in the future you will feel more confident in identifying imposter syndrome and realizing that when these feelings of inadequacy kind of start to creep in, that you will know that they are not real. I know they feel real sometimes, and it's not to discount how imposter syndrome can make you feel. It can be incredibly tough. Some days and weeks tougher than others to overcome, absolutely. But identifying it and taking a few minutes to talk about it, to admit it, to say these things out loud, it makes all the difference. And I think it can be scary to admit these things. I'm not saying that every time you feel that you're dealing with imposter syndrome, you're going to want to do a social media post or phone your colleagues and talk to them about it. But if you can get in the habit of admitting it, even if it's out loud to yourself and saying these things out loud, I think you'll realize pretty quickly that it is imposter syndrome, and there are no sort of rational there are no truths or rationalities behind these things. You are great at what you do. If you are managing to run a business, whether you are just starting out in business, whether you are hoping to leave your full-time, your full-time career to run your business full-time, or whether you've been in business for 5 or 10 years already, you're doing something right. If your business is growing and you're still excited about it and it's still where you want to be, you absolutely deserve to be there. And I am always around if anyone wants to chat imposter syndrome. I know for me, talking about this stuff out loud and admitting it to other small business owners has been a really big help. Sometimes I think just having these conversations and bringing these topics to light can just make all the difference, rather than trying to deal with this stuff ourselves. We all know that entrepreneurship can be kind of a lonely slog sometimes. And it really does help to have a community of people around you who you feel comfortable speaking with. So I would love to hear from you if this is something that you struggle with. Next week's episode, if you're sort of listening to this close to the air date, next week's episode is going to discuss this topic in more detail. I'm going to be interviewing some other small business owners, some business and leadership coaches as well, to get their feedback and maybe some more ideas on how you can deal with imposter syndrome as well. And if you have any questions about imposter syndrome that you would like me to ask my guests for next week, please do feel free to send them over. Send me a DM on Instagram, and send me a message through my website. Lots of different ways to reach me. Links are all in the show notes. And if you did enjoy today's episode, if you learned something, you got some value out of it, or you feel a little bit more connected to other people who are dealing with the same things, please do take a moment to leave a review for the podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts if you're listening there. Really easy to do. You can just click on Small Fish Big Pod and leave a review. And you can also subscribe to the podcast on any platform: Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen. Subscribe and you will get a little notification through when new episodes come live. So thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope that helped, and I will see you next week.